The Ozark Mountains of 1912 held secrets that locals whispered but never dared to explain fully. Hunters had gone into those forests, strong men with rifles and grit, and never returned. Families waited in vain for weeks, their hopes dwindling with every dawn that came without news. Some claimed it was the land itself swallowing them, others said feuds or outlaws might be to blame. Yet no one could ever prove it. The story of the lost hunters became a shadow over every small town, a reminder that in the Ozarks, man was never truly master. Before we journey deeper into this chilling tale, make sure to subscribe to our channel so you won't miss the most gripping stories of the past, tales where history and human struggle collide. Edward. Ned Harlan was no stranger to shadows. At 34, he had returned from war carrying scars not only on his body, but within his soul. In his Arkansas town, he was both respected and pitied. Respected for his skill as a marksman, pitied for the rumors that followed him. Some whispered he had abandoned his post in battle, though no one knew the full truth. Ned bore the weight of such talk with clenched teeth and silence, and perhaps that silence grew heavier than the accusation itself. He lived with his wife, Margaret, in a modest cabin near the edge of the timber trade routes. Margaret was practical and protective, a woman who knew the dangers of men chasing pride through the wilderness. She had begged Ned more than once to stay close, to let others take the risks, but Ned's restlessness only grew. Hunting was no longer just a way to put food on the table, it had become his chance to reclaim honor. The opportunity came when Samuel Brewer, an older hunter with decades of experience in the Ozarks, spoke of a hunting trip that could bring fine pelts and meat to sell through the winter. Samuel had survived more storms, floods, and bear encounters than most men could recount. His leathery face and steady gaze marked him as someone hardened by the mountains. Yet even Samuel admitted that too many had been lost in the deeper regions of the Ozarks, where trails vanished and storms trapped men for weeks. Alongside them was Thomas "Tom" Calder, barely 20 and eager to prove his worth. Tom's family had worked the logging camps, but he longed to step out from behind the axes and into the wild, where men tested themselves against nature. His wide-eyed optimism clashed with the grim caution of Samuel and the haunted determination of Ned. The three planned their departure as autumn settled in, when nights grew sharp and the forest turned a fiery red and gold. Townsfolk shook their heads, warning them of stories passed down for years. Hunters who left in fine spirits, but whose names were later etched into sorrowful memory. Some even muttered that venturing too far meant courting doom, though no one could say exactly why. Ned listened but pressed on. "A man doesn't prove himself by sitting idle," he told Margaret as he cleaned his rifle on the porch. She folded her arms tightly, her voice firm but trembling. "You've got nothing left to prove to anyone but me, Ned, and I'd rather have you alive than chasing after ghosts." Ned paused, meeting her eyes. "It's not ghosts I'm after. It's a chance to stand straight again." Samuel packed flour, dried beans, coffee, and strips of salted pork, his movements slow but deliberate. He had seen too many trips end badly, and believed preparation was the only shield a man had. Tom, by contrast, fumbled with his gear, his excitement greater than his sense. He joked about bringing back a bear hide to impress the girls at church, though his laughter faltered under Samuel's glare. In town, the blacksmith reminded them to keep their rifles oiled against the damp. The storekeeper muttered about another hunting party that had left months ago and never returned. Every farewell carried weight, as though the community itself feared the Ozarks more than hunger or cold. By the time the three men stood ready to leave, the morning mist curled thick around the valley, and the mountains rose like silent judges in the distance. The journey ahead promised not only hardship, but choices that would test the strength of each man's character. And though none of them spoke it aloud, all felt the same unease, that they were stepping into a land that did not forgive pride. The town lay quiet under a pale autumn sun, its wooden storefronts and dirt roads carrying the scent of smoke from morning fires. It was the kind of place where news traveled faster than the wagons, and where every man's reputation weighed heavier than the goods he owned. Ned Harlan felt those eyes on him as he stepped into the general store to double-check their supplies. The murmur of voices fell low, just enough for him to catch pieces of what was being said. "Off again, chasing the wild," someone muttered. "Mark my words, that land don't give men back," another added. Ned ignored them, though the words pressed against his chest like stones. Pride would not allow him to falter here, not before his companions, and certainly not before a town that doubted him. Outside, Samuel Brewer leaned on his walking stick, not because he needed it, but because years of trudging through the Ozarks had left one leg stiff in cold weather. His eyes scanned the sky, as though reading it like scripture. "Storms come in sooner than folks think," he remarked, his voice steady. "Autumn rains don't wait on a man's plans." Tom Calder shifted nervously, his youthful energy dampened by Samuel's tone. "We'll be fine, won't we? We've got maps, rifles, and food enough. That's all we need." Samuel's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "Maps don't mean much when the land itself changes. Rivers rise, trails vanish, and a man can lose himself even with the sun overhead." Ned placed a firm hand on Tom's shoulder. "Don't let fear rule you, lad. We'll keep steady, and we'll come back stronger for it." The young man's eyes brightened at those words, though doubt still lingered. He looked up to Ned as a figure of strength, someone who had seen war and come home alive. But Tom couldn't ignore Samuel's grim certainty, and the tension between caution and ambition settled into his bones. The three men prepared their gear in silence that evening, each driven by his own reason for venturing into the wilderness. For Samuel, it was duty to share what he knew before time left him behind. For Tom, it was the hunger to prove himself, to transform from boy to man. For Ned, it was redemption, an unspoken war against the whispers that haunted him in every saloon and church gathering. Margaret lingered near the doorway as Ned rolled their bedding tightly. She held out a small packet wrapped in cloth. "Dried apples," she said softly. "Something sweet when you've grown tired of salt and beans." Ned accepted it with a nod, though his eyes betrayed gratitude deeper than words. "I'll come back to you, Margaret. That I swear." She didn't answer, only pressed his hand and turned away, unable to watch him leave. By dawn, the men were ready. Their rifles were oiled, packs strapped tight, and lanterns checked. The horses stamped impatiently, their breath steaming in the crisp air. The forest beyond the ridge loomed, painted in shades of red, orange, and yellow, a beauty that masked its dangers. As they set off, Samuel spoke quietly, almost to himself. "The mountains test a man different than war or work. They'll strip him bare, show what he truly is when hunger and fear take hold." Tom tried to laugh it off, but his voice cracked. "Then I suppose we'll find out just what kind of men we are." Ned glanced at the trail ahead, jaw set, heart hammering. He had chosen this path not just for meat or pelts, but for the chance to silence every rumor that clung to him. To him, the Ozark wilds were not only a test but a promise. If he returned, he would return changed. The sound of wagon wheels faded behind them, replaced by the distant cry of crows. Ahead lay miles of tangled forest, rivers swollen by rain, and valleys few dared to enter. The call of the wild had claimed them, and step by step the men surrendered to it. The morning sun burned away the last threads of mist as the men entered the foothills of the Ozarks. The road soon gave way to uneven ground, where tree roots twisted like veins and rocks jutted sharp from the earth. Every step forward felt like a small surrender to the wilderness, as though the land itself was pulling them deeper into its heart. The air grew damp, filled with the scent of pine and decaying leaves. Squirrels darted across fallen logs, and the occasional cry of a hawk pierced the stillness. For a time, the forest seemed alive with its own rhythm, and Tom marveled at it, his eyes wide with the curiosity of youth. "Never seen trees so tall," he said, adjusting the strap of his rifle. "Feels like they're watching us." Samuel, trudging behind, gave a low grunt. "Trees don't watch, boy, but they do hide what's waiting behind them." Ned pressed forward, his stride determined, though the uneven trail tugged at his legs. He scanned the horizon, searching for clearings that matched the rough sketches on their maps. The land, however, had a way of twisting itself. What looked promising on paper turned to brambles and dead ends in reality. By midday, the men were sweating despite the cool air. The slope grew steeper, and horses struggled under the weight of supplies. Samuel suggested they pause near a stream, where the water gurgled fast and cold over stones. Tom knelt eagerly, cupping water into his hands. "Cold as ice," he gasped, shivering as it ran down his chin. "Don't drink too fast," Samuel warned. "That water's pure, but your belly'll pay if you gulp it like a fool." Ned splashed his face, letting the chill wake him from the heavy fog of exhaustion. For a fleeting moment, he felt almost cleansed, as though the forest were stripping away the dust of the town. Yet, behind that relief, lay unease. He remembered stories of hunters who had stopped by streams much like this, only never to reach the towns again. They resumed the climb, weaving through dense underbrush that clung to their clothes. Hours passed, and the sound of civilization faded until only their footsteps and the occasional caw of crows remained. The silence between them grew noticeable. Each man carried thoughts he chose not to voice. It was Tom who finally broke it. "My pa always said these mountains were cursed, said no good comes from chasing game too deep." Samuel snorted. "Cursed? No. Just merciless. The mountains don't care about you, don't care about your family or your prayers. They'll take you same as they take a deer, and they won't blink doing it." Tom's face paled, and he looked to Ned for reassurance. "We'll be fine," Ned said firmly. "We've got rifles, food, and the will to see this through. That's more than enough." But even as he spoke, the forest seemed to grow heavier, the canopy blotting out more of the sun. The air turned thick, pressing on their lungs. Each bird call grew distant, until a hush settled that made every snap of twig beneath their boots sound like a warning. Late in the day, the sky darkened suddenly. Clouds rolled over the peaks, and a sharp wind cut through the trees. Ned cursed softly. Storms moving fast. The first drops of rain fell fat and cold. Within minutes, trails of water streamed down the slopes, carrying mud and leaves with them. The horses stumbled, and one pack nearly tore loose before Samuel caught it. "This is how men get lost," Samuel muttered. His voice was grim, not afraid, but heavy with the weight of experience. They pressed on, drenched and weary, until the storm eased into a steady drizzle. By then, the trail they had followed was half washed away. Behind them, the town felt like another world. Ahead, the forest seemed endless. The Ozarks had welcomed them in the only way it knew how, with hardship. And though Ned forced a steady stride, he could not shake the thought that they had already stepped beyond the reach of safety. By the fourth day, the rhythm of travel began to fray. The men rose early, ate quickly, and pressed forward, but the weight of the forest bore down harder with each passing mile. The drizzle of the storm had lingered, turning trails into slick channels of mud that swallowed boots to the ankle. Their provisions, carefully rationed, felt lighter each morning. Ned marched at the front, eyes fixed on the slope ahead. He favored the paths that climbed, convinced that reaching higher ground would bring them clearer views and easier bearings. Behind him, Samuel shook his head at every sharp turn, muttering about wasted energy and the folly of abandoning known trails. "Climbing won't get us meat," Samuel said as they stopped to catch their breath. His tone carried the weight of years spent in these hills. "Game runs low where the ridges are steep. Down in the hollows, that's where you find deer, turkeys, the kind of kill that keeps men alive." Ned's jaw tightened. A man who follows the same trail as everyone else finds the same scraps. If we push farther, we'll find game no one else dares to claim. The words struck Samuel like a challenge. He leaned on his stick, his weathered face lined with frustration. "Or we'll find nothing but hunger. Pride doesn't fill a belly, Ned." Tom hovered between them, shifting from one man's side to the other, like a boy torn between his father's stern hand and his brother's daring ambition. He admired Ned's confidence, but Samuel's warnings gnawed at him. The tension spilled into their daily tasks. When Samuel suggested setting snares near a creek, Ned dismissed the idea as wasting time. When Ned pushed them up a rocky incline, Samuel cursed the bruises on his leg and called it foolishness. Their words were sharp, and though no fists were raised, the bitterness hung in the air. That night they built a small fire under a canopy of sycamores. The flames flickered weakly, damp wood resisting the spark. Tom chewed his salt pork in silence, his eyes darting between the older men. "You've both got sense," Tom finally said, his voice soft, careful. "Why not put it together instead of pulling apart?" Samuel gave a weary sigh. "Because some men won't listen when wisdom's given." Ned shot him a glare across the fire. "And some men mistake caution for wisdom when it's really fear." The silence afterward was heavier than the darkness pressing in around them. The crackle of fire was the only sound, and even that seemed uncertain. In the morning, the conflict resurfaced. The trail split near a fallen oak, one path dipping into a shaded ravine, the other climbing a ridge slick with moss. Samuel argued for the ravine, pointing out tracks in the mud, deer, raccoon, maybe even wild turkey. Ned insisted on the ridge, claiming the higher vantage would give them a better chance of spotting larger game and finding dry ground. Tom swallowed hard. Maybe we could split up, just for a short while. Cover both paths." Samuel's eyes hardened. "You don't split in these mountains, boy." "That's how men vanish." Ned said nothing at first, only stared at the ridge, jaw set. When he finally spoke, his voice was low but edged with steel. "We'll take the ridge. Trust me." Samuel muttered a curse under his breath, but followed, limping as the climb began. Tom trailed close behind, glancing nervously between them, the weight of their divide pressing on his chest. By midday their packs felt heavier, though nothing inside had changed. Hunger gnawed sharper, and the silence between them deepened. The forest, once a marvel to Tom, now felt like a cage tightening with each step. The cracks in their brotherhood were showing, and though the men pressed forward, each carried doubts that grew as steadily as the mountains around them. The ridge carried them higher until the trees thinned, exposing a stretch of open ground scattered with stones and fallen branches. The sky above was heavy with grey, the sun muted behind thick clouds. Their boots sank into damp soil, and the air grew cooler, the smell of wet leaves clinging to every breath. It was there on that lonely plateau that they found the first sign. Half buried beneath moss and dirt lay a rusted pot, its handle twisted as though it had been left in haste. Beside it, the remnants of a campfire, blackened stones arranged in a circle, now long cold. A few feet farther, a torn coat sleeve fluttered weakly in the breeze, snagged on a thorn bush. The fabric was stiff, weather-worn, and unmistakably human. Tom froze, his face drained of color. "Someone's been here and not too long ago." Samuel crouched, brushing dirt from the pot. His weathered fingers traced the rim, his expression darkening. "This is no trader's camp. Hunters, and not recent. Look at the rust. Whoever left this, they've been gone years." Ned scanned the area, his rifle gripped tight. His heartbeat quickened, though his face betrayed nothing. "It could have been abandoned. Folks lose things out here all the time." Samuel shook his head. "Not this deep. A man doesn't come this far without purpose. And if he left these behind, something drove him out in a hurry, or worse, stopped him from taking them at all." The forest fell silent around them as if listening. The usual chatter of birds had vanished, replaced by a stillness that settled heavy on their shoulders. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Tom whispered, "Could it be the ones the townsfolk talk about? The hunters who never came back?" Neither Samuel nor Ned answered at once. Ned finally exhaled, steadying himself. "Stories grow taller with every telling. Don't let fear write the truth for you." Yet his words rang hollow in the still air. His eyes lingered too long on the torn coat, and his grip on the rifle betrayed the unease he would not confess. They moved on, though slower now, every step measured. Tom kept glancing over his shoulder, certain the silence concealed eyes watching from the trees. Samuel's usual muttering fell quiet, his gaze fixed on the ground for signs of trails or struggle. The forest, once an enemy of mud and incline, now carried the weight of something unseen. When they stopped for a brief rest near a cluster of rocks, Tom finally spoke again. His voice was hushed as though the forest itself might overhear. "What if we're following the same path they took? What if we're walking straight into what swallowed them?" Samuel didn't deny it. He looked at the boy with tired eyes and said, "Then we'd best be sharper than they were. Nature doesn't spare the careless." Ned cut in quickly, his tone firm, almost defiant. "We are not them. We'll take what they couldn't finish. We'll come back stronger with proof in our hands." But inside he felt the stir of something cold. The ground beneath his boots seemed heavier, as though the earth itself remembered the men who had stood there before him. He forced the thought down, unwilling to let Samuel or Tom see doubt in his eyes. The sun slipped lower, bleeding faint light through the canopy, and shadows stretched long across the ridge. The forest whispered with unseen movements, branches creaking, leaves rustling without wind. The men pressed on, but the unease clung to them, unshakable. They had come seeking game, yet what they found was far more unsettling. A reminder that the wilds did not forget, and that others had walked this path only to vanish. The Ozarks had given them their first warning, and though none admitted it aloud, each man felt the same chill crawling down his spine. By evening, clouds thickened again, rolling in low and dark over the ridges. The air pressed heavy with moisture, and the faint rumble of thunder echoed across the valleys. Samuel's gaze lingered on the shifting sky. He had lived long enough to know what was coming. "Storm's on us," he muttered. "Best find shelter before it tears us apart." Ned squinted toward the horizon, unwilling to concede too quickly. "It may pass. If we keep moving, we can gain ground before nightfall." Samuel's patience frayed. "Ground won't matter if you're dead, boy. Out here, storms kill quicker than wolves." Tom looked between them, worry etched across his face. "Maybe we should listen to him, Ned. That last rain nearly swept us off the ridge." Reluctantly, Ned yielded. The forest offered little comfort, but Samuel led them to a shallow cave tucked beneath a limestone outcrop. The mouth gaped like a wound in the rock, the air inside cool and damp. They gathered what dry branches they could find and managed a small fire, its glow fighting against the storm that broke outside. Rain pounded the earth, drumming against leaves and stone. Wind howled through the trees, and every crash of thunder seemed to shake the ground beneath them. Inside, the men huddled close to the fire, shadows flickering across tense faces. Samuel broke the silence first. "I've told you before, Harlan. Pride's a poor compass. You keep dragging us deeper, chasing some ghost of redemption. These mountains don't care about your name or your honor." Ned's eyes narrowed, his voice sharp. "And what would you have us do? Crawl back to town with nothing to show? Let folks whisper that I'm a coward again? No, Samuel. I'll not live under that shadow." Tom shifted uneasily, sensing the fire between their words burn hotter than the flames at their feet. "We're all here for a reason," he said carefully. "We just need to hold together." Samuel's glare never left Ned. "And what's your reason, boy? You risk our lives for whispers in a saloon? That's foolishness. Pride blinds a man, makes him deaf to warnings until it's too late." Ned shot back, his voice rising over the storm. "And caution kills just as surely. You'd have us sit by streams and chase rabbits while real hunters push farther. You think the lost men vanished because of ambition? No, they vanished because they weren't strong enough." The fire popped, sending sparks into the air. The storm raged louder, drowning the space between them. Tom clutched his knees, his heart racing. He could see truth in both men's words, but the gulf between them seemed too wide to bridge. When silence returned, it was Tom who spoke first. His voice trembled, but he forced the words out. "I don't want to vanish like them. I came here to prove myself, yes, but I don't want to die for it." Neither man answered. Samuel turned away, his shoulders sagging under years of experience no one wanted to hear. Ned stared into the fire, jaw clenched, but a shadow of doubt flickered across his face. As the storm dragged on, the cave walls revealed faint markings scratched deep into the stone. Tom ran his hand across them, frowning. "What's this?" Samuel leaned closer, squinting in the dim firelight. Crude lines, perhaps made by a blade or rock, crossed the surface in jagged strokes. Circles, slashes, and rough symbols, like a desperate man's attempt to leave a trace. "Hunters," Samuel said grimly. "They marked their way, maybe hoping someone would follow. Looks like it didn't save them." Tom shivered and drew back, the weight of their discovery pressing on him like the storm outside. Ned's face remained hard, but his eyes lingered on the markings. Somewhere deep within, The fire of his determination met the chill of unease. The rain showed no sign of stopping. The storm, the cave, the symbols, all conspired to remind them that the mountains had claimed men before and might well claim them again. By dawn, the storm had broken, leaving the forest drenched and steaming in the pale light. Every branch dripped with water, and the ground oozed mud with each step. Their fire had burned out hours before, and the men rose stiff and weary, their clothes damp and clinging. Hunger gnawed at them sharper than the cold. "We'll need fresh meat," Samuel said, adjusting the strap of his rifle. His face looked older, drawn from a restless night. "The pork won't last us another week, not at the pace we're going." Ned nodded grimly. "Then we hunt. Deer, turkey, whatever we can bring down." Tom tried to sound eager, but his voice carried fatigue. "I'll take first watch on the trail. Maybe we'll flush something out if we split a little." Samuel's tone hardened. "Not too far. You remember what I told you? Men who stray from the group don't always find their way back." The morning hunt began with quiet determination. They moved through thickets, their boots sucking against the mud, rifles at the ready. Signs of life were scarce. A snapped twig here, faint tracks there, but nothing substantial. The forest seemed to guard its creatures, hiding them deep in valleys the men had not yet touched. Finally, Samuel halted, crouching near a patch of disturbed leaves. His finger traced the outline of hoof prints. Deer. Not more than a day old. Ned's eyes lit with resolve. "Then we follow." The trail led them deeper, until the smell struck them first. A sharp metallic tang that caught in the back of the throat. Then they saw it. The carcass of a young deer sprawled across the ground, half-eaten. Flies swarmed thick over the torn hide, and the flesh glistened where it had been ripped away. Tom gagged, turning his head. "What did that? Wolves?" Samuel knelt, studying the marks. Wolves, maybe. Or a bear. Could have been scavengers. Doesn't matter. "It's no good to us now." Ned scowled, frustration burning in his chest. "We wasted half a day chasing a ghost." The sight of the carcass lingered with them as they pressed on. Every snapped twig made Tom jump. Every shadow seemed to shift. The forest was no longer merely indifferent, it felt hostile, as though reminding them how little control they truly had. When the sun reached its height, they paused by another stream. Samuel chewed on a strip of dried pork, rationing it carefully. "This won't hold us," he said, his voice low. "If the game's scarce, we'll need to set snares. Maybe fish. Every bite counts now." Ned bristled. "We didn't come out here to trap rabbits." Samuel met his gaze evenly. "Better a rabbit in your belly than pride in your grave." Tom listened in silence, torn again between them. He wanted to believe Ned's fire, but Samuel's pragmatism weighed heavy. For the first time, he wondered if he had made a mistake, leaving the safety of town for this unforgiving wilderness. That night, as they camped beneath a stand of pines, Samuel spoke softly. His words meant as both warning and lesson. "I've seen families swept away in floods, whole camps lost to storms. These mountains don't play fair. They take what they will. You can't fight them head-on. You can only bend, endure, and wait for the chance to outlast." Tom lay awake long after, the fire crackling low. Samuel's words pressed into his mind, but so did the image of the deer carcass torn apart and left behind. He couldn't escape the thought. The wilderness was already testing them, stripping away their strength bit by bit. And though Ned's resolve remained unbroken, Tom could sense the shift. Survival was no longer about glory or redemption. It was about enduring one day at a time against a land that showed no mercy. The following days dragged on with little reward. They had set snares, but only managed a pair of scrawny rabbits. The streams gave up a few trout, but not nearly enough to keep 3 grown men strong. The weight of hunger pressed on them like a constant hand at their throats. Their packs felt heavier, though they carried less, and every mile seemed longer than the last. It was Tom who spotted it first, an outline of a cabin half hidden by trees in a hollow. His voice cracked with a mixture of relief and disbelief. "There! Do you see it?" The men pushed forward, branches slapping against their shoulders, until the shape grew clear. A small homestead stood before them. its roof sagging, walls grey and weathered. The door hung crooked on its hinges, and the windows gaped like empty eyes. "Looks abandoned," Ned said, though his tone carried curiosity more than certainty. Samuel's jaw tightened. Or worse, a place like this doesn't just fall empty. Folks leave when there's reason. Still, hunger and weariness drove them closer. They stepped inside cautiously, the wooden floor creaking under their boots. Dust lay thick on the furniture, and cobwebs draped across corners, but signs of life lingered. A table overturned, a broken rifle stock near the hearth, a chair splintered as though kicked aside in struggle. Tom swallowed hard. Something happened here. Ned's eyes swept the room, alert. Maybe they left in a hurry. Could have been raiders or even a bear. Samuel knelt, running his hand across the floorboards. His fingers brushed against a dark stain, faded but unmistakable. His face grew grim. This wasn't just leaving. Someone fought here, and lost. The silence of the cabin pressed down heavy. The smell of old dust mingled with the faint, lingering hint of smoke that had long since died. Every corner seemed to whisper of lives cut short, of voices silenced. Tom shifted uneasily. "We shouldn't stay, not here. It feels wrong." But Ned's mind churned with stubborn determination. If something happened, then there may be answers, maybe even supplies. He rifled through a cabinet, finding only broken jars and a rusted lantern. The deeper he searched, the more convinced he became that the place held clues about the vanished hunters. Samuel's voice cut through sharply. "You're chasing shadows again. This place is a grave, Harlan. Best we leave it be." Ned turned, his face hard. "And what if this is the truth we've been chasing? What if this is where it all started?" Their voices rose, clashing against the hollow walls. Tom stood frozen between them, heart pounding. He felt as though the cabin itself leaned closer, listening to their dispute. Samuel's tone was final, sharp as a blade. "I've lived long enough to know when land wants men gone. This place reeks of it. Leave it, or it'll drag us under too." Ned's reply came low, stubborn. "I didn't come here to turn back at the first sign of fear." The standoff lingered until Tom whispered, "Please, let's just go." His voice carried such raw fear that both men fell silent for a moment. The boy's eyes were wide, his knuckles white around the rifle he clutched too tightly. Outside, the forest waited in silence, the air unnervingly still. When they finally stepped out, the sun was sinking behind the ridges, staining the sky with streaks of red. The homestead stood behind them, empty yet heavy with the memory of violence. They left without another word, but the discovery weighed on each of them. For Samuel it was confirmation of dangers he had long feared. For Tom it was terror made real. And for Ned it was something else entirely, a spark of obsession that drove him deeper, determined to uncover what others had only fled. The days after the homestead weighed heavy on the men. Their pace slowed, not only from hunger, but from the weight of doubt. Each step deeper into the Ozarks felt like a step farther from safety. The forest grew thicker, its canopy blotting out much of the light. Night stretched long and restless, with the crack of twigs in the dark stirring uneasy thoughts. Samuel had grown quieter, his strength stretched thin. His limp worsened, and he leaned harder on his stick with every mile. When he did speak, his words carried the sharp edge of resolve. He was done with Ned's obsession, done with following ambition into a place that swallowed men whole. One evening, as Tom collected firewood, Samuel pulled him aside, lowering his voice to a whisper. "Listen close, boy. Harlan's leading us to ruin. You can see it same as I do." Tom frowned, hesitant. "He's strong. He believes in what we're doing. Maybe that's what we need." Samuel's eyes narrowed. "Belief doesn't keep you alive. Look at me. Look at him. He's chasing ghosts, and it'll kill us all if we let him. When the time comes, we turn back, you and me. We'll leave him if we must." The words struck Tom like a blow. He looked at Samuel, seeing not only the weight of years, but also the desperation of a man who feared the path ahead. Yet betrayal of Ned felt like betrayal of himself. He had followed Harlan into the mountains because he wanted to prove he was more than a boy. To turn back now, Was that wisdom, or was it cowardice? That night, as they sat around the weak fire, Ned's gaze shifted between the two, suspicion flickering in his eyes. Tom's silence was heavier than usual, his glances quick and nervous. Samuel avoided Ned's stare, focusing on carving a piece of wood, though his hands trembled slightly. "You two whispering behind my back?" Ned asked suddenly. His voice was calm, but the firelight caught the sharpness in his eyes. Tom startled. "No, sir. Just talking about the trail." Samuel didn't flinch. "I told him the truth. That this is folly and we'd best turn back before the mountains eat us alive." Ned's face hardened. "So that's your plan then? Sneak the boy away while I keep pressing forward?" Samuel met his anger head-on. "Better to lose pride than to lose life. You've been blinded since the day we left. I won't see him buried in these woods because of your stubbornness." The fire crackled between them, sparks rising into the night. Tom's heart raced, his hands clammy as he clutched his rifle. He wanted to speak, to mend the rift, but the words tangled in his throat. Ned leaned forward, his voice low and dangerous. "You think me blind, Samuel. I know what you're trying to do. But hear me now, I'll not be abandoned. If either of you runs, you'll do it knowing the mountains won't give you mercy." The silence afterward was suffocating. Only the distant call of an owl broke it, a haunting echo that deepened the tension. Tom finally whispered, "We don't have to fight each other. We need each other. That's the only way we'll make it back." Samuel turned away, his jaw tight. Ned stared into the flames, his mind burning with anger and betrayal. He had trusted Samuel's experience, leaned on his wisdom when needed, yet now he saw only treachery. Sleep came poorly that night. Tom lay awake, his thoughts torn in two. Samuel's warning rang with truth, but Ned's determination still pulled at him. Between them, trust had cracked, and in its place grew something far more dangerous: suspicion. And in the silence of the wilderness, suspicion was enough to tip survival into peril. Hunger drove them harder than pride or fear ever could. Their food stores were down to scraps: beans, flour clumped with damp, and a few strips of pork that smelled more of salt than meat. The weight of emptiness settled in their bellies, making every step slower, every thought heavier. "We'll waste away if we don't bring something down soon," Samuel said, his voice rough from fatigue. His face was pale, the limp more pronounced. "We need meat. Real meat." Ned's jaw set tight. "Then we hunt." They rose before dawn, following the faint signs of movement in the underbrush. For hours the forest seemed barren, as if every creature had fled before them. Then, near a grove of hickories, Tom froze. He pointed with trembling hands, a black bear rooted among fallen logs, its massive shoulders rippling with strength. The animal turned its head, snout dripping with insects and rot from whatever it had been tearing into. It hadn't noticed them yet. Tom whispered, voice cracking, "It's huge." Samuel's eyes hardened. "We can't take it. Too risky. A bear's not meat, it's death waiting to happen." Ned's gaze locked on the beast, his hunger and desperation boiling into resolve. "It's food enough for a week, maybe more. If we bring it down, we live." Samuel grabbed his arm. "Or we die right here." But Ned shook free. "I won't starve like a coward. We take it now." Before either man could stop him, Ned raised his rifle and fired. The crack split the silence, echoing through the valley. The bullet struck, and the bear roared, wheeling toward them with rage in its eyes. "Damn fool!" Samuel shouted, leveling his rifle. His shot rang out, striking the beast in the shoulder, but still it charged. Tom fired next, the recoil jarring his thin frame. His shot grazed, barely slowing it. The bear barreled forward, jaws wide, a wall of muscle and fury. "Again!" Ned roared. He fired a second shot, the round tearing into the bear's chest. It stumbled, crashing into undergrowth, thrashing wildly. Samuel moved to finish it, but in the chaos the beast swiped with one massive paw. Samuel cried out as claws raked across his leg, sending him sprawling. Blood spread quickly through the torn fabric. "Samuel!" Tom screamed, rushing to his side. Ned emptied the last round into the animal's skull. At last, the bear collapsed, the forest trembling as its weight struck the earth. Silence followed, broken only by Samuel's ragged breathing. Tom pressed cloth to the wound, his hands slick with crimson. "It's bad." "It's bad, Ned." Ned knelt beside them, his face grim. He glanced at Samuel, then at the fallen bear. The victory felt hollow, a survival bought at terrible cost. Samuel gritted his teeth, pain etched deep into his weathered face. "Told you. Foolishness." Ned clenched his fists, shame battling with stubbornness. "We needed this. Without it, we'd all be finished." Tom looked between them, fear bright in his eyes. "And now he can barely walk." They butchered the bear as quickly as they could, the air thick with the smell of blood and fat. The meat, though heavy, was divided between their packs. For the first time in days, they had food enough to last. Yet the price was clear. Samuel's strength drained with every step, his wound festering even as he tried to mask the pain. That night, the fire burned bright with fresh meat roasting over it, but no one celebrated. Tom sat close to Samuel, watching him fight to keep his eyes open. Ned stared into the flames, his face carved with guilt, though pride would not let him admit it aloud. They had won a battle against the wilderness, but at a cost that gnawed deeper than hunger ever had. The days after the bear fight blurred into one long struggle. Samuel leaned heavily on Tom's shoulder, his limp more severe with each mile. The wound festered despite their attempts to clean it, and the infection spread a fever through his body. Ned carried most of the weight now, meat, tools, rifles, pushing forward with grim determination, though every step reminded him of the cost of his choices. By the fifth morning, the forest opened unexpectedly. The men stood on a ridge overlooking a valley, unlike any they had seen before. Green even in late autumn, it stretched wide beneath them, with clusters of trees scattered like islands amid meadows. A stream glimmered faintly as it wound through the grass, and in the distance, the skeletal remains of campfires dotted the ground. Tom whispered, "It's beautiful." Samuel's eyes narrowed. "No, it's cursed ground." His voice cracked with weakness, but the words carried weight. "Too many have come here. Too many never left." Ned stared down, his heart hammering. The valley seemed to call him, promising answers to the mysteries that had haunted their journey. He felt the pull of it, as though fate itself had guided their steps. They descended carefully, the slope slick with loose soil and stones. The valley floor bore signs of what Samuel had feared. Scattered remnants of camps long abandoned, rusted pots half buried in dirt, collapsed tents rotted away by time, and crude fire pits filled with ash, hardened by years of rain. Tom bent down, picking up a tarnished belt buckle. "These were men like us." His voice shook. "Where did they go?" No one answered. The silence of the valley was deeper than the forests they had left behind. Even the wind seemed to pass it by, leaving the air heavy, still, and suffocating. Farther in they found graves, shallow mounds covered with stones, some marked with sticks or crudely carved crosses. Bones lay scattered near one mound where the earth had given way, bleached by years of sun and rain. Tom stumbled back, his breath caught in his throat. "God help us," he murmured. Samuel lowered himself beside one of the markers, his face etched with sorrow. Hunters, just like the stories. Lost, buried here by whoever survived long enough to dig. Ned knelt, running his fingers through the dry soil. His mind swirled. The whispers in town, the warnings he had dismissed, all of them lay before him now in undeniable truth. Yet instead of fear, he felt a strange clarity. This is it. This is where they vanished, and now we know. Tom's eyes filled with panic. "Know what, Ned? That we're next? Look at this place. It's a graveyard. We can't stay here." But Ned's gaze burned with obsession. "Don't you see, Tom? This proves it wasn't just talk. These men came as we did and they fell, but we won't. We'll walk out with the truth they couldn't carry." Samuel coughed, his strength faltering. "Pride brought them here. Pride buried them. And you're no different, Harlan." Ned looked away, jaw clenched. The words struck deep, but he refused to let them root. As night fell, they camped near the stream. The valley stretched around them like a tomb, silent and vast. Tom lay awake, staring at the faint glow of stars overhead, haunted by the graves. Samuel drifted in and out of fevered sleep, mumbling half-formed warnings. Ned sat apart, his eyes fixed on the darkness beyond the fire, his mind alive with thoughts of what they had uncovered. The valley held the answers he had sought, but at what cost? The valley brought no peace. By morning, Samuel's fever had worsened, his skin clammy and pale. He could barely stand without Tom's arm under him, and every step sent a grimace of pain across his face. The wound on his leg oozed with infection, the bandages already stained through. "We can't keep on like this," Tom said, his voice trembling with desperation. "He's not going to last if we push deeper. We need to turn back now." Ned shook his head, eyes fixed on the distant ridges. "Not yet. We've come too far to leave empty-handed. If we turn now, all we've endured, the storms, the hunger, the bear, it'll be for nothing." Tom stepped in front of him, blocking the path. His hands shook, but his voice rose with sudden force. "For nothing? Look at him." "Samuel's dying, Ned. Do you not see it?" Ned's jaw clenched, but he refused to meet the boy's eyes. "We'll find a way. Once we've proved what happened here, once we have the truth, then we'll go back." Samuel leaned against a tree, his voice weak but cutting. "Truth won't feed you, it won't carry you home. Don't. Pride's all you've got left, Harlan, and it's killing us." The words landed heavy, stirring the doubts Ned had buried. He had dreamed of walking back into town with trophies, with proof that he was no coward, that he had conquered what others feared. Yet as he looked at Samuel, broken, fevered, clinging to life, he felt the weight of guilt press against his chest. Still, his stubbornness held fast. Tom's eyes burned with anger and fear. "This isn't about us anymore, it's about you. Everything since we left has been about proving you're not what they said you were. But I don't care what the town whispers. I care if we make it out alive." For the first time, Tom's voice cracked with defiance, no longer the voice of a boy caught between two men, but of someone demanding to be heard. Samuel looked at him with pride even through his suffering. Ned turned sharply, his voice low, dangerous. "Careful, lad. You don't understand what it means to carry shame, to live under it day after day." Tom stepped closer, his fists clenched. "Maybe I don't. But I do know what it means to die for nothing. And if you keep dragging us farther, that's exactly what's going to happen." Silence fell heavy between them, broken only by Samuel's labored breathing and the distant rustle of leaves. Ned looked away, his chest rising and falling as though he were wrestling the storm inside him. For a moment Tom thought he might yield, but Ned's voice returned, cold and unshaken. "We press on, a little farther. Then we'll turn back." Samuel let out a bitter laugh, choked by pain. "A little farther, that's what every lost man says, until there's no farther left." Tom's shoulders sagged, his anger giving way to despair. He wanted to scream, to force Ned to see reason, but he saw in his eyes that nothing could break him. Not hunger, not storms, not even the graves scattered across the valley. That night, they built another fire by the stream. Samuel drifted in and out of fever dreams, murmuring warnings and fragments of old stories. Tom sat close, his rifle across his knees, his heart pounding with dread. He no longer knew if their greatest danger was the wilderness or the man who led them deeper into it. The breaking point had come. Trust was gone, hope was thinning, and the wilderness pressed harder with each passing hour. Something had to give, whether it was Ned's pride, Samuel's strength, or Tom's fragile faith that they could ever find their way back. The valley seemed endless. Each morning, when they thought they recognized a ridge or a cluster of trees, the land twisted into shapes that defied memory. Paths doubled back on themselves. Streams they thought they had crossed once appeared again, and landmarks repeated, as if the forest were rearranging itself to keep them trapped. Tom was the first to speak what all three felt. "We've been here before. I swear it, that fallen oak, we passed it yesterday." Ned shook his head, though unease clouded his eyes. "You're mistaken. The land plays tricks when you're tired. Keep moving." Samuel, leaning heavily on Tom, muttered, "No trick, we're lost, circling like fools. And the mountains know it." Their supplies dwindled again despite the bear meat they carried. It spoiled quickly in the damp air and much of it had to be thrown away. What remained was stringy and bitter, and the smell clung to their clothes, drawing flies wherever they camped. Hunger returned, sharper than before. One afternoon, as they climbed a slope slick with moss, Ned stumbled. His rifle clattered to the ground, sliding into the brush. For the first time he didn't rush to retrieve it. He dropped to his knees, hands pressed into the earth, chest heaving. Tom froze, shocked to see the man he had thought unbreakable falter. "Ned?" Ned didn't answer at once. He stared at the ground, his breath ragged. Finally, he whispered, "I don't know the way anymore." The admission hung in the air, heavier than the silence of the valley. Tom's chest tightened, fear flooding through him. If Ned, their leader, their anchor, was lost, then what hope did they have? Samuel coughed, each word a struggle. "I told you pride would blind you, now it's stripped you bare." Ned's fists clenched. He forced himself back to his feet, though his face was pale and sweat clung to his brow. "We're not finished. We keep moving. There's always a way out." But the fire in his voice no longer carried conviction. It was desperation, thin and fraying. That night, as the fire flickered low, Samuel called Tom closer. His voice was weak, but his eyes still burned with the weight of years. "Listen to me, boy. The mountains will break a man who won't bend. I won't last much longer. When I'm gone, you'll need to carry the sense I've tried to give you." Tom's throat tightened. "Don't say that." "You'll pull through." Samuel's hand gripped his arm, surprisingly strong for a man so near collapse. "No. You know it as well as I. But hear this. You survive by humility, not pride. Don't follow him into the dark if he refuses to turn back." Tom's eyes burned with tears. He nodded, though the promise tasted like betrayal. Ned sat apart from them, staring into the fire. He heard fragments of their voices, saw the way Tom leaned close to Samuel. Suspicion gnawed at him, mixing with guilt and exhaustion. He knew the old man was fading, yet he couldn't shake the fear that Samuel's last words would turn Tom against him entirely. As dawn broke, the forest revealed nothing new. The same ridges, the same streams, the same unbroken silence. Their boots dragged, their shoulders stooped, and their eyes hollowed with despair. Every step forward felt like walking into a trap that had no end. And for the first time since they had entered the Ozarks, Ned felt truly powerless. The trail had vanished, not just from the land, but from within him. The night after the trail broke them, Samuel slipped further into fever. His breathing turned shallow, his skin burning hot despite the cold that clung to the valley. Tom stayed close, pressing damp cloths to his forehead, whispering words of comfort that sounded hollow even to his own ears. When dawn came, Samuel didn't stir. His chest rose and fell slower, each breath a battle. His lips parted, and he whispered only a few words before drifting again. "Don't follow him. Bend. Don't break." Tom gripped his hand, tears streaking through the dirt on his face. He wanted to scream for help, but there was no one to hear. Ned watched from the edge of camp, his expression unreadable. He knew what Tom refused to say aloud. Samuel was dying. His pride had driven them this far, but no pride could pull the old man back from the edge. By midday, Samuel was gone. He passed quietly, his body slackening as his final breath slipped away. Tom crumpled beside him, sobbing into his sleeve. The forest around them was silent, as though even the birds respected the moment. Ned stood motionless. His throat tightened, but no tears came. He knelt and closed Samuel's eyes, his voice low. "You were right more often than I'd admit. And I'll carry that with me." They buried him beneath a cairn of stones, hands trembling as they stacked each one. It was crude, but it was all they could give. Tom whispered a prayer, his voice broken, while Ned kept his silence. When the last stone was placed, the boy turned on him with red-rimmed eyes. "This was your doing," Tom spat. "If we'd turned back, he might have lived." Ned's face hardened, though guilt carved deep lines in his features. He knew the risks. We all did. "That doesn't make it right," Tom's voice cracked. "We're all that's left now, and you drag us deeper still. For what, pride? To prove you're no coward?" The words hit Ned like blows. He wanted to argue, to defend himself, but Samuel's voice echoed in his mind, words spoken by the fire. Pride blinds a man, makes him deaf to warnings until it's too late. For the first time, Ned's will faltered. He looked at Tom, saw the fear and anger in his eyes, and realized what he had become, a man willing to sacrifice others for the sake of his own name. That night, as they sat by the dwindling fire, Ned spoke softly, almost to himself. I thought if I brought back proof, if I faced what others feared, the whispers would stop. Maybe I could look my wife in the eye again. But Samuel was right. This land doesn't care about pride, it only takes. Tom's eyes softened, though sorrow still weighed heavy. Then let's go back. Please, Ned. Let's go home before it takes us too. Ned nodded slowly, the decision carving itself deep inside him. At first light we turn. I'll get you out of here, Tom, even if it costs me everything. The boy's shoulders sagged with relief, though exhaustion dulled his gratitude. He leaned against a tree, eyelids heavy, while Ned sat watch. The fire flickered low, and beyond it the valley stretched vast and dark, littered with the ghosts of those who had come before. Ned gripped his rifle, staring into the night. For years he had carried the weight of shame, the fear of being called a coward. But here at last he understood. Redemption wasn't about proving himself to others. It was about what he chose now. And with Samuel buried beneath the stones, and Tom's fragile hope resting in his hands, Ned made his final choice, to live, not for pride, but for survival. The morning after Samuel's burial was grey and bitter. Mist clung to the valley, wrapping the graves in silence as though the earth itself wanted to hide what had been lost. Ned and Tom packed what little remained of their supplies, their movements slow, careful, and heavy with grief. The decision was made, no more chasing shadows, no more pressing deeper. The only goal now was survival, to carve a path back to the world that seemed so far away. The journey out was harsher than the path in. Trails that had once seemed clear were now twisted by exhaustion and doubt. Every ridge looked the same. Every stream whispered mockery as if leading them in circles. Yet Ned forced his way forward, guiding Tom with every ounce of strength left in him. "Keep close," Ned urged, his voice hoarse. "Step where I step. Don't waste your strength on fear." Tom nodded weakly, his face gaunt from hunger and sleepless nights. "I'll follow. Just don't let go." They crossed swollen creeks that chilled their bones, scrambled up rocky inclines with bleeding hands, and pushed through thickets that tore at their clothes. Hunger gnawed at them, sharper than ever, but they rationed what little meat remained, chewing it in silence while their eyes searched the horizon for signs of escape. Days blurred together. The forest tested them at every turn, storms that lashed against their backs, nights where the cold bit into their skin, mornings where the weight of despair nearly pinned them to the ground. Yet something within Ned had changed. Pride no longer fueled him. Every step was for Tom, for Margaret waiting back home, for the chance to see light beyond the shadows of the mountains. On the 7th day after Samuel's death, they stumbled upon a trail etched faintly into the ground. Wagon ruts, old and shallow but real. Tom fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. "We've found it," he gasped. "God help us, we've found it." Ned hauled him up gently. "Not yet, lad, but it's a start." They followed the trail, hope flickering stronger with each mile. Finally, as dusk painted the sky in bruised colors, they spotted smoke rising in the distance. A small Ozark town, its chimneys sending plumes into the air, stood nestled at the edge of the forest. When they staggered into the streets, townsfolk stopped to stare. The two men were hollow-cheeked, clothes torn, eyes sunken with exhaustion. Tom leaned heavily on Ned, who carried himself upright though his body trembled with weakness. "Lord above," someone whispered. They came back. The blacksmith who had once warned them ran forward, his face pale with disbelief. "Where's Samuel? Where's the rest?" Ned's gaze dropped, his voice heavy. "Gone. The mountains took them." Tom's voice cracked but carried with newfound strength. "But we came back. We made it." The townsfolk gathered, murmuring, questions spilling like water. Ned ignored them, guiding Tom toward the inn where warmth and food awaited. He felt the weight of eyes on him, but for the first time, the whispers no longer mattered. He had faced the wilderness, and though it had stripped him bare, it had given him something greater than pride: clarity. Later that night, as Tom slept for the first time without fear, Ned sat alone by the fire. Margaret's face filled his thoughts, the promise he had made to return. He had not returned with glory, nor with trophies, but with survival, and perhaps that was enough. He whispered into the flames as if speaking to Samuel, to the lost hunters, to himself. It wasn't pride that saved us. It was the will to endure. The story of the vanished hunters would remain a mystery, their graves scattered in valleys where no man dared linger. But Ned and Tom carried their truth. The Ozarks were not conquered, only endured, and survival was its own form of victory. And so their tale did not end in triumph, but in life, fragile, scarred, and real. Before we close, don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you never miss stories like this, where history and survival collide. And if you're ready for another chilling journey, click the video suggested on your screen to keep watching.